They didn't leave when the disrespect started, they didn't leave when their feelings were dismissed, they didn't leave when love slowly began to feel like survival, they stayed, until one moment changed everything. This isn't just one person's story, it's the story of many people who stay too long, hoping love will eventually become safe again. At the beginning, their partner was attentive, kind, convincing, they felt seen, chosen, important, but over time, things shifted, the tone changed, affection turned inconsistent, communication became defensive. Whenever they expressed pain, they were told they were overreacting. Whenever they asked for reassurance, they were labeled too much. And slowly, without realizing it, they began to question themselves. They stopped trusting their emotions, they stopped trusting their memories, they stopped trusting their instincts, they learned how to explain disrespect away. They didn't mean it. They're just stressed. Every relationship has problems. So they adjusted, they became quieter, more careful, less visible, not because they were weak, but because they were trying to survive emotionally. Disrespect rarely starts loudly, it starts subtly, with jokes that hurt, boundaries that get ignored, apologies that never lead to change, and when disrespect becomes familiar, it becomes dangerous. The moment that changed everything wasn't a fight. It wasn't another argument, it was clarity. They found themselves responsible for something greater than just enduring pain, a future that deserved safety, and for the first time, they asked a question they had avoided. If someone I love learns about relationships by watching this, what will they believe love is supposed to feel like? That question didn't bring instant courage, but it brought honesty. They realized something difficult, they weren't staying because of love, they were staying because of hope. Hope that things would return to how they once were, hope that patience would be rewarded, hope that endurance would turn into respect, but endurance is not intimacy, and patience cannot replace boundaries. Confidence didn't appear overnight, it arrived quietly, through awareness. They began listening to themselves again, trusting their discomfort, recognizing that love should feel safe, not confusing. They didn't leave immediately. They prepared, they rebuilt their voice, they strengthened their boundaries, they imagined a life that didn't require constant emotional defense, and when they finally walked away, it wasn't dramatic, it was calm, it was painful, and it was necessary. Healing didn't look like happiness at first, it looked like grief, loneliness, uncertainty, but slowly, peace replaced chaos, and peace changes people, not all at once, not loudly, but deeply. Peace gives you space to finally hear your own thoughts again, thoughts that were once drowned out by arguments, confusion, and emotional noise. In the quiet, they began to notice how tense their body had always been. How they were constantly bracing for the next reaction, how love had trained them to stay alert instead of at ease. Peace showed them how exhausted they truly were. Emotional exhaustion doesn't always look like sadness, sometimes it looks like numbness, sometimes it looks like indifference. Sometimes it looks like pretending everything is fine because you no longer have the energy to explain your pain, and for the first time, without pressure or judgment, they allowed themselves to feel it all, the grief of what could have been, the anger of what should never have happened, the disappointment of realizing that love alone is not enough. They mourned the version of themselves that tried harder than they should have. The version that kept explaining disrespect, the version that believed endurance was proof of loyalty. Healing forced them to confront a difficult truth. They didn't lose themselves overnight, they lost themselves slowly. Every time they chose silence over honesty, every time they accepted less to keep someone close, every time they minimized their needs to avoid conflict. Peace made those moments visible, and visibility brings accountability, not accountability toward the other person, but toward themselves. They began asking better questions. Why did I believe love had to hurt to be real? Why did I confuse consistency with safety? Why did I feel guilty for wanting respect? These questions weren't easy, but they were necessary. Healing isn't about blaming the past, it's about understanding it clearly enough to stop repeating it. As time passed, they noticed subtle changes. They no longer felt the urge to over-explain, they stopped justifying their boundaries, they felt less drawn to chaos disguised as passion. What once felt exciting now felt exhausting. Peace recalibrated their nervous system. It taught them that calm doesn't mean boring, it means safe. They learned that healthy love doesn't require constant proof. It doesn't keep you guessing. It doesn't make you earn basic kindness. Slowly, they started Trusting themselves again, trusting their emotions, trusting their memories, trusting the quiet discomfort that used to be ignored, self-trust became their new foundation, and with self-trust came discernment. They noticed red flags faster, not with fear, but with clarity. They listened more to actions than words. They stopped romanticizing potential and started valuing consistency. This wasn't bitterness, it was wisdom. Healing didn't make them colder, it made them clearer. They still wanted love, they still believed in connection, but they were no longer willing to sacrifice their peace for it. They realized something powerful. Anyone can promise change, but respect shows itself. Without being asked, anyone can apologize, but accountability shows itself through behavior. Anyone can say I love you. But love without safety is just attachment. Peace sharpened their standards, not because they thought they were better than others, but because they finally understood their worth. They no longer chased closure from people who couldn't give it. They no longer waited for apologies that would never come. They no longer needed validation from those who benefited from their silence. Closure came from clarity, and clarity brought freedom. They learned that walking away doesn't always feel like relief at first. Sometimes it feels like withdrawal, like missing something familiar. Even if it was harmful, that doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. It means your nervous system is adjusting to safety. Healing is uncomfortable because it's unfamiliar, but unfamiliar doesn't mean wrong. As weeks turned into months, peace began to feel normal, not perfect, but stable. They laughed more freely, rested more deeply, spoke more honestly. They stopped abandoning themselves to keep others comfortable, and something else changed. They became less available to people who only showed up halfway, less patient with manipulation disguised as misunderstanding, less tolerant of patterns that once drained them. This wasn't cruelty, it was boundaries. Boundaries aren't walls, they're filters. They don't block love, they protect it. Peace taught them that they don't need to be chosen at the cost of themselves. They need to be met with respect, met with effort, met with emotional responsibility. Anything less is not love, it's negotiation. They also learned to forgive themselves for staying too long, for not knowing sooner, for believing words over actions. Self-forgiveness was a turning point, because healing isn't about being perfect in hindsight. It's about being honest in the present. They stopped asking, why did this happen to me? And started asking, what is this teaching me? And the lesson was clear. Love should not feel like survival, connection should not require self-betrayal, and peace should never feel like a reward. It should feel like a baseline. They didn't emerge from healing unscarred, they emerged informed, stronger not because they endured pain, but because they refused to normalize it anymore. If you're listening to this and something inside you feels heavy, pay attention. That heaviness might not be weakness, it might be awareness. If you're constantly explaining someone's behavior to yourself, pause. If you feel anxious more than safe, pause. If your needs feel like an inconvenience, pause. Love should expand you, not shrink you. Choosing peace doesn't mean you stop loving deeply. It means you stop loving recklessly, and when peace becomes your standard, everything else has to rise to meet it. You don't need to announce your healing, you don't need to justify your boundaries, you don't need permission to walk away from what harms you. Peace is enough of a reason. If you're on this journey, take your time. Healing isn't linear. Some days will feel strong, others will feel tender. Both are progress. And one day, you'll look back and realize, you didn't just leave a situation, you returned to yourself. If this story spoke to you, subscribe. This channel is for people learning to choose themselves, even when it's hard.